In this video, I'm going to be looking at a few music titles that I've bought or been sent over the last few months and talk about how in an age of streaming and downloads, a physical release can be used as a promotional tool. Due to content match issues though, I can't play you any of the music. You'll find links to everything shown though in the video description text box. The first package I've got consists of two 12-inch and one 7-inch records sent to me by a chap called Richard Houghten. He got in touch because he wanted me to see his unusual record designs, and I think you'll enjoy having a look at them too. The first disc is a bit of a two-in-one. Not only do you get a psychedelic multicolour design on the disc, but it also incorporates a scratch hologram on the centre of one side, so we'll shine a light on that in a minute. The next disc though is the one I was really looking forward to seeing the most, as I've never seen anyone do an effect like this on a record before. This 7-inch features a multicolour pattern on one side that will show up once it's rotating and the light is shined on it, so we'll have a look at that as well in a minute. And finally, the last record, well, that's a 12-inch, which features the brightest coloured vinyl I've ever encountered, a kind of day-glow shocking pink, which doesn't really come across properly on this camera for some reason. But again, this one has that reflective pattern on one side. So let's have a look at these on the record player. You can see the scratch hologram towards the centre of the disc. It changes shape as the record rotates, and I have to say that I really enjoyed the music on this one as well. It's organic sound set to a kind of chilled out hip-hop beat, and this is music I would never have encountered on my own if it hadn't been released on these unique discs. So that shows how the media that music is presented on can sometimes affect whether or not it gets heard. Now let's have a look at the other discs. First the side of the disc without the pattern, and now the other side. It really is a mesmerising effect, and I don't know if anyone has ever done anything similar on a record, but if they have, I certainly haven't seen it, so it's a first for me. The effect is different on the larger record, but you can see when I move the camera around that the pattern is affected by your position in relation to the light source and how this reflects back off the record. But now for the bad news. Unfortunately, these are all sold out. However, you can still listen to Richard's music through his Bandcamp page, and if you follow him on there, as soon as he comes out with some new records, no doubt you'd be the first to find out. Now, on to some other formats. You've no doubt seen all those articles going on about how cassette sales are at their highest level for over a decade. Of course, a decade ago, the sales really were in the toilet, so that stat is largely irrelevant. You might also see things saying that the sales have doubled this year compared to last year. But if I had a hat shop, for example, and I told you I was experiencing a 100% year-on-year increase in sales, it might sound impressive until I tell you that this year I sold 2 hats rather than the one from the year before. Yes, sales are increasing, but I think it's a bit of a stretch to call this a comeback just yet. The US cassette tape album sales in 2018 were 219,000 in total. Now times that by 2,000 and you still won't reach the number that was sold in 1988 in the US. Rather than 219,000, back then they were selling 450 million. Now this is a top 20 cassette album chart for the UK in 2019. This one was compiled in July. The number one bestseller for the year at this point had sold a total of 4,000. An interesting thing on here though is when you look at the top 3 albums on the cassette chart and then compare those to the UK album chart as a whole for 2019, you'll find the number one cassette album is down at number 5. And then the next 2 cassette albums don't even make the top 40. So rather than contributing significantly to the sales numbers, the cassette releases are often just being used as a promotional tool, a novelty collectible. However, it is a relatively inexpensive way to get your album mentioned in the press. If you were to knock out a few cassettes, the inevitable cassette revival headlines would help to promote your album, and fans would still buy these limited edition collectible cassettes too, so it's a win-win. Of course, if you want to stand a better chance of getting your album mentioned in the press, a simple cassette might not be enough anymore. You might want to do what Mark Ronson did earlier this year when he released his album as a limited edition retro bundle, which consisted of a cassette, a minidisc, and an 8-track. It's easy enough to get a cassette duplicated as long as you don't want chrome tape, which isn't being made anymore, or Dolby noise reduction, which isn't being licensed. There are plenty of places that can knock you out a basic pre-recorded cassette. But minidisc, well, that's a different story. Pre-recorded minidiscs were never big sellers because, Most people just copied their own discs at home, usually from a CD. Pre-recorded albums were sold in limited quantities up to the early 2000s. These were different from the discs you could make at home because these were pressed just like a commercial CD release, and unlike the magneto-optical blank discs, these were held in a caddy that had a shutter that only opened at the bottom, so therefore they had a full face label on the top, and they also came packaged in a special case that held the disc as well as a booklet. The facilities for making these pre-recorded discs disappeared years ago, though, so if you want to sell a Minidisc album now, you're going to have to write it onto a standard magneto-optical disc, just like anyone could at home. However, one thing you can't do at home, well, most likely, is print up a disc that looks like this. The place doing these is a small company in the UK called Band CDs. They'll duplicate the discs, print their artwork onto the disc, print the card inlay, put it in a case and shrink wrap it, ready for sale, and in my opinion the end result looks excellent. Now, you may have seen me show the Retro Grooves minidiscs in the past. Band CD made those, and you can still get those from the website eox.no. Now, Mark Ronson also used Band CDs to make his limited edition minidiscs, and if you look on the Band CD's website, as well as the details of how much the service costs, you can see a video of their special UV minidisc printer in action. The discs themselves come from Japan, where, fortunately, at the moment, Sony are still producing blank discs, although they are the last company making them. I don't know how long this is going to carry on for, so I bought a bundle of these from Japan earlier on in the year. They worked out at just over £2 a piece once you'd factored in the delivery cost to the UK, and even without any printed artwork, Minidiscs still look amazing. You've got to love these things. I mean, they look like a music format from an alternate future. You can see, though, that these are the same discs that are being printed on by Band CDs. The Minidiscs themselves do have a write protect notch in the corner, so if you wished, you could slide the shutter back and rewrite over Mark Ronson, but of course you wouldn't want to do that, would you? Don't answer that. The thing that's slightly amusing but also a little bit sad about this, though, is that Mark Ronson is a Sony music artist, and yet when he wanted to release an album on Minidisc, the format that Sony invented, they no longer have the means to do it. They had to ask a little company on an industrial estate near Southampton in the UK to do it for them. But then again, putting out a Minidisc is a walk in the park compared to getting a new release out on 8-track. The problem with 8-track is that no one has made new blank 8-track cartridges for decades. You can't buy the shells and you can't buy the special carbon-backed tape that goes inside them. So how do you do it? Well, you contact a company called Dead Media Tapes in the US. It's a small firm. It's run by one chap out of his garage in North Texas. There'll be links to these articles in the video description, and they go on to explain how he produces the cartridges. It turns out that it involves reusing old ones. He buys these at places like yard sales, looking for lightly used examples. He then removes the labels, cleans the cartridge case, opens it up, lubricates the rollers, checks if there's sufficient tape length for the new project, cuts off any excess tape, replaces the splice and the pad. Then he raises the tape on a degausser and then finally writes the new recording onto them and gives it a new label. Interestingly, this is one of the few 8-tracks I've bought where none of the tracks are split across 2 programs. Just to contrast that, here's a cartridge I've got which shows just how messed up things can get when you try and divide 6 tracks across 4 programs. I just wanted to show you this set because it demonstrated how with a bit of effort it's still possible to get new music released on old and sometimes dead formats, as long as you know how to get in touch with the right people. But now what if you wanted to do something similar, but instead of outsourcing it, you were going to do it all yourself at home? Well, that's exactly what Rob Dimeo has done with his Bytes of Sound box set. This is an album of recreations of video game music, and while it's available digitally online, the physical edition contains a micro cassette, a compact cassette, minidisc, and a CD. The compact disc is the most convenient of the formats for most people to play. It's possibly the least interesting of the bundle from a novelty aspect. So we'll move on to the minidisc. Unlike the one shown earlier, this has been recorded at home, so the artwork on this, rather than being printed on the disc, is just a simple adhesive label, but it still looks neat, and it comes with a printed J-card in a jewel case. The minidisc blanks you can buy from Japan come with a plastic slipcase that isn't really suitable for putting artwork on. So these hinged plastic cases fill a need for something more aesthetically pleasing. I'm not sure who makes them, but they can be found on eBay amongst other places, and the templates for making up the J-cards that go in them can be found online as well. So with a colour printer, some labels and a Minidisc recorder, you can come up with something that looks a lot more interesting, if a little less practical for most people, than a burnt CD. Now, a cassette is something that you can easily make at home. Add a nice J-card and a printed label, you think you'll be ready to go. But I wouldn't recommend using standard off-the-shelf tapes. Using this company in the UK as an example, Tapeline, here you can choose from a variety of colours of cassette shell, and then you get them loaded up with tape to the length of your choosing, and the whole thing should probably end up cheaper than buying branded standard length blank tapes. Of course, if you're prepared to spend a bit more money, you can get someone to duplicate the tapes for you instead. But if you're not sure how many you're going to sell, it's difficult to commit to a bulk order up front, and it can end up being quite expensive as well. Now onto the micro cassette. I thought this was going to be the whole album on this tiny format to add to my small micro cassette album collection. However, it turns out it's just a novelty. It contains a 2-minute compilation in total, which consists of a few seconds taken from each track. Now, I don't think Rob was expecting anyone to try and play it, but there are a few people out there who are like me who would. Out of the box, I'd say the Minidisc is definitely the pick of the bunch. If you're going to be selling physical copies of a homemade album, perhaps to go along with a download code, then really the Minidisc might be the format to consider. I mean, they're really easy to record at home from a digital master. They also sound excellent, and they look cool, even with just a stuck-on label. The track names can be programmed in as well, so those appear on the screen. You've got near instant access to any of the tracks. You don't have to worry about leaving weird blank silent sections at the end, and depending upon the machine you've got at home, you might be able to record them at faster than real time. And if you want to promote your music with a physical copy and you're on a limited budget, I'd just say take a good look at Minidisc. But now, to finish off with a quick word about a new release on Minidisc's 1990s rival, the DCC. This is Run Girl Run, a compilation of music from Angela Lashley, which has been put together by the DCC Museum. Since 2017, they've produced one new DCC release each year, and every time they go all out on the packaging. They've really excelled themselves this time, though, with the presentation. The quality surpasses anything that came out on the format back when it was alive in the 1990s. Now, with this being a commercial release, I can't play you any music from it, but if you want to have a listen to it, well, there's a link on the DCC Museum's website to download a sample from the album so you can see if it's your kind of music, and if you like it, well, you can buy a copy of this cassette from there as well. I've also got to give a plug for the museum's 52-minute documentary all about the DCC, which can be viewed in full now on their YouTube channel. So to sum up, in today's video you've seen a few physical and visual ways that music artists are using to raise awareness of their latest releases, whether it's someone recording music at home in their basement or an artist signed up to a major label. Getting noticed is half the battle, and the things I've featured today show that with a bit of inventiveness and some old formats, it may be possible to rise up above the crowd. You'll find plenty of links to the things featured in the video description text box, but that is it for the moment. As always, thanks for watching.